Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. Indy Johal has a story that is remarkable and unremarkable in equal measure.
Yeah, and it is going to be a unique listen, especially the early years, because it's sort of reverse of the other stories that we've heard. Yeah. So it's fascinating. And that longevity, that like long run up. I mean, that's a long run up.
But also to see the success that she's had, and that kind of application of just not stopping and keeping going. And I think quite often when you see people that are successful, it almost looks untouchable. You think, well, how did that happen? You went from kind of nowhere to somewhere, but I can't see the steps. I think with Indy, you get to see and feel those individual stepping stones that have taken her to where she is now.
She's normal.
Yeah.
She's normal.
Yeah, it's fabulous, really enjoyable. So it's a very special day today. We're talking to Indy Johal, which is exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
It is. Interesting story.
Absolutely.
No pressure.
Indy is principal dentist at Renew Dental Practice in Walsall, which is in the Midlands. Qualified back in 2009, and a self-confessed nerd, which I'm sure we'll find out more about. Welcome, Indy. How you doing?
How you doing?
Guys, thank you for having me. I like to be a nerd, but I don't really know if I actually am one.
Is there a definition or a test that you go through to be identified as a nerd?
I don't know. I think nerds come in all different categories, though, don't they? I think nerds that kind of just are interested and inquisitive and just kind of obsess about finding out about things. That's kind of, we all like to be that sort of.
That's not nerdy, is it?
No, but you can be nerdy like that, can't you?
Yeah. I think it depends. Well, I suppose you can have dull old nerds, can't you?
Yeah, but the thing is, you could be nerdy about learning about business and obsessing about people and that's okay, nerdy. But if you were for fear of offending train spotters, that might not be good nerdy.
No, or for them it's good nerdy. But I suppose, isn't that the beautifulness of the? Thank you. There we go. I thought there's a song in there.
Anyway, we should talk to Indy as Indy.
Oh yeah, come on. Join in when you like.
I'm not going to interrupt them.
Yeah, no, not at all.
We occasionally go off on a ramble, so it's
We do. I want to start with the fact that you were the first person in your family to go to university, which is absolutely massive. But before we get to that, can you roll back to when you were teeny tiny, and what did life look like when you started, before you got to that kind of doing your GCSEs and heading off to university?
Yeah,
what was family life like when you were young?
So yeah, you're right. I was the first person to go to university in my family, but I guess like my story started like I was born in the UK. I was born in London, and I was a child of an immigrant, so obviously I didn't have much support in the UK. There wasn't a lot of people to look after me, and my dad used to actually drive a cab back in those days, and he was saying that my mom used to work at the airport, and she'd gone back to work when I was 2 months old because they needed to make money and all of this stuff. And he always says this story to me that one of the days he just dropped into the nursery because he had a cab fare that had come around that way. So he thought, I'm going to pop in, I'm going to see my baby, and then I'll just carry on working. And he said, I came in and you were crying and nobody was looking at you and you looked like you were so distressed. So he said, that's when I just made the decision that you're better off with my parents in India. So I'm going to send you back so they'll actually look after you, rather than we just work like crazy hours and you're just with somebody else who's not looking after you. So I went back to India. I had my first birthday in India without my parents, actually. And there's loads of photos from that time where there's loads of food on the table and there's just a photo of my parents in between the samosas and all of this, and just me in the background. Like, yes, it's my first birthday.
Oh, desperate.
So, it was a little bit of a different kind of childhood, but I'm so glad to have had that upbringing and that time with like my grandparents and back home. I think it just adds a little bit of something else to your childhood, and I think you have a lot of freedom as a child when you're in kind of like a country like India. You're just roaming around, you're doing your own thing, you can just get on with the day and do whatever you want. And when I came back to the UK for good, I was around 5 years old. I came back to the UK and I couldn't speak English. I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't really recognize my parents because it had been such a long time since I'd met them and like spent time with them and knew them.
And I suppose there's no like WhatsApp or anything like that, or
and you know, back in those
video
days,
callings.
Nobody had phones. There used to be a phone, like one phone in the village. So it was actually called, the phone booth was actually called an STD, which now looking at it, it's like, why would it call an STD?
You wouldn't want to be going there, would you?
I don't even know what it stands for. And if that phone would ring, they basically would send one of the local kids running to the house, whoever the phone call was for. And then you would have to run there before the money ran out and speak to whoever it was and then run back home. So it was like a different time.
What's interesting, Indy, I think the sacrifice that parents make for their children. You know, we've talked to lots of people who their life originated in India, and their parents made almost like the reverse sacrifice, that they uprooted the family and decided to come to England. Quite often it was in the 60s or 70s when, you know, it wasn't an easy place to come to because they wanted to build a better life for their kids. And it's interesting that the reverse is true for you, that your parents had come to England but found that at that time it wasn't the best place for you to be, but to make that sacrifice to, you know,
to not see your daughter,
to pass their daughter back to grandparents in India because actually that was better, and then you come back. I think it's remarkable.
Are you an only child, Indy?
No, I'm one of four, so I'm the eldest. I'm actually the eldest grandchild on my dad's side and the second eldest on my mom's side. So I was like, you know, the prized possession when I went back to India because they hadn't had a baby in the house for such a long time. So everyone was really excited, and I think that's what makes that transition easier because you get so much love when you're there. So it didn't, I didn't feel like, I don't remember a time where I was thinking like, oh, where are my parents? I don't think I had time to think, where are my parents? Because there was too many other people there to entertain me and take care of me. But my parents, I think, did find it tough. And my mom says that sometimes, you know, she would like sit and look at the cot and be crying and thinking, what's the point of us being here? Because we don't even have our baby. So, you know, I think for them, it was a massive sacrifice. And if I look at what position they were in, and that's just one of the sacrifices that they made. They came from a very kind of humble beginnings in India, and you know they didn't have a lot when they were there. They came here with one focus, and that was just to make it. So you know how you think of the American dream, this was just the UK dream. They were going to come here, they were going to work hard, they were going to make something of themselves and, you know, establish a base for their future family. So I think for them, that was a massive sacrifice, like one of many that they've made while we've been growing up. So I look at their sacrifices and think, I don't know if I could make the same.
I assume they didn't send your siblings back to India.
Yeah, so during that time, I came back permanently when I was 5, but I did come back for a little bit in between, and my brother was born. When he was 4, he came back with me as well, so he did the same. So he was a little baby, and again, yeah, and we were there, and I was in school and everything like that, and then we came back to the UK, and they moved from London to Birmingham. And this is like one of the things that I love about my dad in particular. He didn't have a lot of fear at that time, and I think it was because he thought he doesn't have a lot to lose. So he was a cab driver, he had saved together a little bit of money, and somebody somehow had told him that the shop trade was a good trade. And so he had just found a shop and he said, I'm going to buy it. And I was thinking, like, now I look at him and I think, how did you do that? Like, you just uprooted your life, you sold your house, you came to a different city, and you just said, right, I've got a business, I'm going to make this business work, and that's that, and that's how it's going to happen. And when I came back to the UK, I didn't even know where I was, because we'd left the London house and we were in Birmingham. We were in a completely different place. It was alien.
What I love is these stories are so rich, aren't they? And it's so easy to get drawn to the well-known stories or the well-known people. But when you hear stories like that, there'll be so many people that will take so much from it, because it's just everyday life. And like you say, the sacrifices and the things that people do, and listening to, you know, that issue around your dad and kind of, I'm going to buy a shop. Naivety is a really underrated skill. I think if you just crack on and do stuff, you'll find a way of making it work.
Different country, different language, different place. I mean, it's like, okay.
So my dad always tells this story, how that when they bought the shop, they didn't know what half of the produce was, because obviously they were driving cabs before. So even if I ask my dad now, how do I get from here to here in London? He will know it like the back of his hand. He still knows the roads. He still knows everything. So he was just like, oh, that was easy for me because I learned the map so quickly. I could do that within like no problem. But when it came to having the shop, they didn't know what beans were. They didn't know what certain foods were. So people would come in and they would say like, I just want a can of beans. And my dad would be like, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean beans? And then they had to show him the can, and then he would go to the stockroom to find that can and bring it back and like give it to the customer.
Oh, wow.
Terrific.
Wow.
Absolutely terrific.
Yeah.
So
you're
back in the UK.
The cost of beans, he'll know it from every single.
Yeah, I bet he does. I bet he does. Yeah, make sure you factor in inflation
and utility bills. Ooh.
So you got back in the UK. You're now settled in Birmingham, which I assume that's where you did your schooling.
Yes, I did. Yeah,
through Birmingham. And then you said that you love your dentist and you did work experience. Yet another person
of
that
work
did
experience,
work experience in a dental practice. We were talking to somebody just earlier on today, and the same thing. And we were saying how now dentistry isn't on the list of places you can take work experience in.
Yeah, I think it's hard now to get a position.
And that's the thing, and it obviously inspired you, and it's become your career, and you now own a practice. If you hadn't had that work experience opportunity, would that have been the case or not?
No.
I don't know, but
It wouldn't have been the case, because it's funny you say that. You know, I used to have braces when I was younger, and I was like one of those sassy teenagers, and my orthodontist asked me like, oh, what do you want to do when you're older? Are you considering dentistry? And I just looked at him and I was like, no, like, why would I want to look in someone's mouth all day? There's absolutely no way. And I just was like so blunt with him, and he didn't know what to say. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but okay, fine, I've said it now. And then I just left. I never thought about it. And then I had to fill out my work experience placements. And I was thinking at that time, I'm going to do pharmacy. You're in a little pharmacy, and it's just a little group. And like, how hard can it be to know what drugs are? Like, I thought, yeah, this is just a good job. And I went to do my work experience in pharmacy, and I just did not like it. I thought, I can't do this all day. I don't have anyone to talk to. I don't like, I'm going to get bored. And I had done the second placement in dentistry just kind of off the cuff, because it was one of the places I just ticked it, and I just thought, it's just a week. It'll be over in a week. It'll be fine. And when I do my work experience, it was with my own dentist, and I tell you, like, I just had such a good time. I think the team was so close. They all had so many jokes with each other. They had jokes with the patients, and you know, the day just used to go so quickly. And when I did my work experience, you could actually, like, with the permission of course the dentist and the nurse is still there, you could do like a little bit of suction, or you could do a little bit back then. And I did a little bit, and I just thought, oh my god, I really, really like this. And I remember my dentist, he used to have back problems even back then, and he wasn't in on those few days when I was doing my work experience, but he made an effort to come in just to check on me and see how I was getting on and how the team was. And I just thought, I love this guy. I want to be just like him. And ever since then, like, so I did the work experience, and I think the very next week I applied for a reception position in a dental practice opposite my dad's shop. And I just thought, oh, I'll just try it, and I'll just see, like, it's opposite the shop. I'll be able to come and go really quickly, easily. It'll be fine. And then literally after about 3 weeks, I started working in that dental practice, and I worked in that dental practice on and off, like after school, after uni, in between holidays, until I qualified.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Lovely story. Lovely story. So going back to that opening point about you being the first person in your family to go to university, given what you said about your father, I imagine you got loads of support to fulfill your ambitious dreams, because your father's obviously, you know, pushed on and had to just make the best of his situation. So was it a big day when, as a family, you were the first person to go to university?
Yeah, I think for them it was a massive sacrifice as well, because I was going away. They didn't know really what to expect. I mean, obviously I'd lived away when I was a kid, but that was with family, so that was completely different. And I was going away from home for university, and they just didn't know what to expect, what's going to happen, like how is she going to survive, what's going to go on. And I went away to a different country, so for them it was just like, it was just a big shock to their system, I think. But, you know, with my parents, both of them, they've been so pro-education since we were young for all of their kids. So all four of us, they've really pushed us a lot. with regards to education, and with that being an avenue to pursue whatever you want in the future. So if you build a solid foundation, you can go from there and do whatever you want. Even if you don't want to work in that field forever, you've got a foundation to work from. And I think my dad really felt it, because he had an opportunity at one stage to possibly go to medical school, and he wasn't able to make that work due to like funds. And he always wanted his kids to, if they wanted to do that, to have the opportunity to do it.
Which is amazing. And you say you sort of went away, but
tell us about the university
you went to the
experience.
first faculty of medicine, which is at Charles University in Prague. So it wasn't like you say you went away, you went to Liverpool, or you went to London.
Country.
You went to another country. And we've actually spoken to Kunal Patel, and Kunal Patel's the principal, along with Lucy, of Love Teeth. And he went to Prague to qualify as well. So he shared with us his own experience, which we found quite startling in terms of what that was like for him. But what was your experience like of qualifying overseas?
Is it the same place?
I think it is
slightly different. So I think he was a little bit further, and I was right in the centre. There was quite a few different faculties back in those days.
Oh, because he was out.
He was like in the middle of nowhere.
Right, I think he thought he was going to the party town of Prague,
thought it was going to be like the stag centre of the world.
So you were actually in the city.
I was, and I think we talked a little bit about naivety, which I think has like played a massive role in my life over time. I went to university in Prague, and I think I didn't really know what to expect. I was going to go away to university, and I just thought in my mind, how hard can it be? It's a different place. It will be fine. It's not going to be the end of the world. People go away all the time. It'll be fine. But it was
like a
shock to the system, because, I grew up in and around Birmingham, multicultural. I never had a problem. I just felt like I fitted in completely. And I went to Prague in 2004, I think it was, and 2003, 2004. And there was hardly any brown people. It was a completely different world. My dad came to drop me off. He used to wear a turban at that time. And somebody actually stopped their car in the middle of the street, reversed it, and started staring at him, because they'd never seen anything like that before in their life. I just thought, oh my God, I was getting frustrated, like, what's happening here? Like, that's not right.
Yeah.
And my dad just turned to me and he said, I'm so good looking. This happens to me all the time. And I just thought, do you know what? I'm just going to take it like that. That's how it is, It's so amazing. That's what's going to happen. But it was like a big adjustment. So I tried to learn language. We had language classes for 3 years in order to be able to speak to patients. And now looking back, actually, it's quite useful, because can speak a little bit of Czech with patients, a little bit of Polish you can understand. So, it's come in handy, even like having been back in the UK. But yeah, it was a completely different experience. And
was there anyone else from England with you in your?
Yeah, there was actually quite a few of us, and some in the upper years, and after us, quite a lot of people came from the UK as well. But there was people from Sweden, there was people from Malaysia, Botswana. It was like very multicultural.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Did you manage to, were you in halls to start with?
I was. So I was in halls about an hour away, but I moved quickly into a flat with my flatmates, who I'm still in contact with even now. I think it's just a different, it's a family away from family, isn't it, when you're at university? So yeah, we moved closer to the university, and we were there for such a long time. And I think, going abroad to university, sometimes it might be a little bit easier to get into the university, but it's extremely tough to pass every year, to finish it and complete it within the allocated time. And I was lucky that I managed to do that. I think I was just, by that time, because I'd had a little bit of a wake-up call with my A levels. I hadn't really put my full effort in, and I'd just taken it for granted that I thought, oh, you know what, I've always kind of scraped by without much effort. I've had A's. I haven't really had to think about it. And when you kind of do your A levels, you kind of misjudge how difficult they're going to be at that time. And it's the age when you want to see your friends, you want to do other things.
Yeah.
You're not mentally completely focused on your studies. So after I had that little bit of obstacle in the journey to becoming a dentist, I just thought, no, I've got to get my head down. I've got to just get through it, and I've got to just crack on with it, really, and get through all of these years and start working.
But it obviously set you up well, because after qualifying as a dentist, you then went on to complete your Royal College of Surgeons exam, postgraduate in endodontics and restorative. So you obviously got that. Yeah, we sort of said at the beginning you're a self-confessed nerd, but clearly the clinical dentistry, the learning of that clinical dentistry is something you're quite passionate about.
Yeah, and I enjoy it. I think, I still think of myself as like not the most academic person. I don't think I don't think anybody knows everything, but I don't know a lot of things. But I like to learn. I like to see how I can improve my clinical skills, how I can improve my practice. So I'm always trying to do something. And I think, sometimes when you come back to the UK, having studied abroad, you have that little bit of a thing that I want to just make sure that I do know everything properly. But, over time, what I've realized is teeth are teeth. And you just have to learn to do them well. And there's a lot of other things that go into dentistry other than doing the actual dentistry. There's so much around it, how you communicate, your interactions with patients, and all of that actually makes I think sometimes a little bit more importance in your work than your actual work. I mean, not that I'm saying my work is terrible, I try to do the best, but there's a lot that goes on around it.
Absolutely. I mean, we're not clinical at all, but we obviously talk to lots of dentists, and it would appear that the most successful practices aren't necessarily the best clinicians. They're good enough clinicians, but they're not the professors. They're people that, they can manage a team, they can build relationships. And it's just interesting because obviously you're still young, but you've done a lot of postgraduate qualifications. Dentists tend to obsess about doing more and more clinical education, but they don't always invest the same time on the business side of things. Mm-hmm. Have you done any formal business learning? Is it just something that's intuitive, you learned as you went?
Not anything formal. I think there was a time when I thought, I want to do an MBA. I want to do something in business. And that was after I'd done one of the postgraduate courses, and I just thought, okay, what's next for me? What am I going to do next? And it was before I had opened the practice, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this, so I'll have a foundation of knowledge for moving forward. And I spoke to one of my friends who actually is a director in banking, and he said, why are you doing it? You don't need it. You need to do the work. You need to do the business. You need to do the everyday tasks, and that will be what will serve you more than learning it academically. And I think that for me was a little bit of imposter syndrome, because I felt like I didn't know enough. I felt like, I just don't know how it's going to be. Like, am I going to be able to do it? Am I not going to be able to do it? But, at one stage, I just had to give myself a little bit of a talking to and just say, you know what, you can take a tooth out, you can do this. Other people come from different countries, they set up shop, look at your own parents, they came with nothing, they started and they did it. So just try it.
There's some skills to learn from your dad, isn't there?
Exactly.
Mum and dad with the learning, business, communication, marketing, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. So then I just thought, you know what? What's the worst case scenario? I had to try to balance it in my own mind that the worst case scenario is that your business will fail, and nobody wants a business to fail. Nobody goes into business thinking it's going to fail. But the worst case scenario is your business will fail, but that isn't the rest of your life. You could go and work in another practice at any point. At any point, you could go and work in another dental clinic. So really, what do you have to lose? You don't have as much to lose as other people that do start off in business with only that to offer.
I think you're right, and I think as a skill, there will always be the need and the requirement for dentists. So whether you're a business owner or working in an associate capacity, you're never going to be short of work. But what I find interesting is that you found all these reasons that you don't have these business skills, and could I do an MBA and I'll learn it on the go. So then you decide to go down the path into practice ownership, which is arguably one of the most difficult routes you could take, because a simpler route would be to buy an established dental practice that somebody else has already built a patient base of and generated fees and profit, and an established team, and they've already done all the marketing. So you decided to find a co-op store that was no longer running. You took a lease on that building, and you then 2 years ago decided to set up you bought the freehold. Yeah. You bought. Good for you. So you actually bought the property. I mean, that's proper commitment.
That is.
And you set your squat dental practice up in what was a shop.
Yeah. So that came about in a really funny way as well, actually, because, I got to the stage in my career where I was doing a lot and I was building really good relationships with patients. And I thought, you know what, I want to have a little bit more control over what goes on around what I do in the mouth, because I felt like I had a good base. I could build good relationships, and in many of the practices that I'd worked in, I'd started the list from either very little or from zero. So it didn't really scare me too much starting from zero. I mean, it is scary in a way if it's your own money that's invested, but I'd done it before and I thought it just takes time. It just takes time to build relationships. It takes time for word of mouth to get around. It just takes time for people to know who you are and what you're about. But eventually, once they find out, they will probably come to you. So in the back of my mind, that was always there. And I had an opportunity before I made the decision for the practice to buy another practice. And at that time, I didn't feel like there was as much scope for growth in that practice as what I could see in the co-op, because the co-op was massive, 1,700 square foot. They had so much potential. It's on a busy high street, parking front and back. And, it ticked all the boxes. And I was just scared because it was purchasing the building, it was renovating it, and I had no experience. And I came to view the property. I came in, I saw it, and it was so big. It was just empty. It was massive. It was an old shop, basically. And I've been around shops all my life. I know ins and outs of shops. So I'm not scared of a shop. But it just looked so big in comparison to the practices I had seen and I had worked in before, that I just thought, I can't see how I'm going to make this work. And I actually said no after that first viewing. I said, no, it's too big of a commitment. I can't do it by myself. I'm not going to do it. And I just left it. After a few months, I was driving past, because I drive past every single day when I was coming back from my old workplace, and the sign had come off. It didn't say to sell, to let, or whatever. It had just come off. And I thought, oh my God, somebody is going to buy that building. They're going to make it into a dental practice, and my brain will explode. I will not be able to drive down this road again. I was like, it won't happen. And so I called up the guy, because I bought it directly from the co-op, and I called him up and I said, what's happened? Somebody's bought the building. What's going on? And he said, no, the sign just fell off. And I thought, right, it's my sign. I said, right, okay, let's start the paperwork. I'm in. I'm done. Let's buy it.
Have you kept the sign?
No, I haven't. I wish I did. I was like, this is what sealed the deal.
Or a picture.
Exactly. It was a metaphorical and a physical sign, wasn't it?
Very good.
Good enough.
Oh, that's very good.
Like that. So setting up a squat, we all know it's not an easy thing to do. What was the impact it had on your life at that time? Did you continue to work as an associate while you were managing setting it up, and what did that look like, that kind of building phase?
And how long did it take?
Oh, guys, you're asking all the tough questions, aren't you?
Get to the meat of it.
In my case, I think I, in some cases, made things a little bit more difficult for myself. And in some cases, it just was part of my journey. So when I was doing the business and building up the squat practice, I'm doing it alone. So I don't have a business partner. I don't have like a spouse or anything like that that's helping me with the business. It's just me. So, at first I was thinking, how it's going to be so difficult. It's all encompassing. And it was. I think for a long time, probably up until 6 months after ownership, all of that time before it opened, it just took over my life. I was working nonstop all the time because I needed to make the funds in order to create the business. I didn't want to take money from anybody, so I didn't want to take anything from my parents. I already had a mortgage which I had to pay, so I knew that I was tight in what else I could, like my affordability. So I had some savings. I tried to do everything myself. So I did things like a little bit the hard way. So when I look back at how we built up the squat practice, I had external contractors do all the building work. So that was like the windows, the floor, the ceilings, the walls, everything like that. But everything else we did ourselves. The flooring, we put the cabinetry in ourselves, we did the tiling ourselves, we did every single other thing ourselves as much as we could so that I could save cost. And it was so funny because at that time my dad would be like, you're so tight. I never knew you were this tight. And I said, no, I'm not tight. I'm literally just like, this is what I have to do. It was quite a difficult journey. But I look back and I think, if I were to do this again, there's so many things I would do differently. But hindsight is just such a gift because you don't know what you don't know at the time. But I also kind of am thankful for that journey because I did everything so the wrong way and the hard way. It makes me less scared going forward because I think it can't be harder than doing it the way I did it already.
But it still worked, didn't it? You're still there. You've got a practice. You've got patients. You've got a team. So all those things came together. What was as you went through this process before you kind of opened your doors and saw your first patient? What was the highest point and the lowest point? What were the extremes that you had to cope with?
So I think the highest point for me, because, I was supposed to open pre-COVID. So I was supposed to open in March 2020. Okay. And in the end, because I couldn't source PPE, my CQC inspections were all delayed. There was just a stop on everything, wasn't there? And then I think dental practices opened. I still remember, I think it was the 6th or 8th of June around that time.
8th of June.
Yeah, you couldn't allow it open before the 8th of June.
2020. And after that, things started rolling a little bit. So I actually didn't manage to open my practice until the 1st of August 2020. And that for me was a massive high point. I thought, at least I can open the doors. I'm just so happy. And, it was both a high and a low point, because I wanted to do it with a bang. I wanted to have a videographer, a photographer, a massive party, have the mayor and do the whole shebang. And I wasn't able to do any of that. But looking back, I think, do you know what? That part of the journey also helped me being opened in COVID, because all practices had their doors closed. Everybody had only one person in the waiting room. My practice didn't look any different, even though nobody knew that was my only patient, the one patient in the waiting room. So that was actually quite a high and a low point all at the same time for me, because it really helped me out. I mean, the government grants, all of that really helped to tide me over until now.
Yeah. What I love is your outlook. Is every time you talk about something which is a challenge, you take a lesson from it and say, well, it was really good. It was really good, though, because now I've learned this, and it was actually really good because this happened. So in terms of other people, that outlook,
glass half full.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what makes you the sort of person that would have set up a squat and be successful in setting up a squat, because you don't see things as problems. They're just obstacles. They're just learning opportunities. You just kind of deal with them and move on. You don't mope about things at all.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I do moan as good as the rest of them during the process. But I think when you get a little bit
You're
of time
hiding it well.
Yeah, well, I think when you get a little bit of time to
it's out the other side now as well.
When you get a little bit of time to reflect, I think that's when you think, actually, do you know, that hurdle helped me so much. I mean, even with opening the practice, I bought the practice the property in 2016. I didn't open until 2020. So a lot of that time I was paying the mortgage myself. I was still working that whole time, but I had some personal circumstances where I had to help in my parents' business. So I was taken away from dentistry. I mean, I still worked full time, but I used to go in the evenings to help my parents with their business, and their business had 60 staff. It had all of this stuff that I didn't know anything about, and I just was thrown into it to help with appraisal, supervisions, recruitment, and kind of like all of this stuff. I didn't know what I was doing, and at the time I was just like, this is too much. But looking back, I think if I can help to manage a business of that size and scale, then running a practice with 5, 6, 7, 10 people, however many people it is not going to be as bad as what I was doing before.
It's a great experience, isn't it?
Well, I think your banker friend that said, don't bother doing an MBA, you just learn. You've done your own MBA.
Yeah.
By setting up a squat and learning that, buying a property, helping your family business, all the things that you need to thrive in business, you just learn by doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a bit like, I'm sure when you were back in dental school, what you learnt in dental school and what it feels like when you've got a patient in the chair, they're different things. And the risk is with lots of formal learning, particularly in the business arena, is you never actually get to apply the things you've learnt. You understand the theory, but what if you've got a team member that suddenly bursts into tears? Where does that feature? You need to...
Page 78, some paragraph 4, how to deal with crying staff member.
So you've been through and you've experienced, business is about juggling balls. It's about spinning plates.
Yeah, and I think
it's never easy.
Thinking about having a business doesn't have to be like just in the dental sector. Obviously, we're talking about dental practice, but any business, you have an opportunity if you just try to look for that opportunity. So even in the old practice where I used to work at, my old boss, he used to be in the army. And he was away a lot. So I just offered it to him. I said, okay, you're away a lot. Like, why don't I just help you? It'll be good experience for me for the future. And you know what? I don't mind. I'm not really doing much in the evenings. I'll help you with your CQC stuff. Like, it'll be good for me to know what compliance is. I started doing all of his compliance folders for like literally no extra money. I used to be there until 10 o'clock at night just because I thought it's a good way for me to learn. So actually that side of things didn't really faze me too much. I mean, there's so much to compliance, and I'm really glad that I can.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm really glad I can offload that now to somebody else. But I think it was so important for me to have an understanding of what it was and what makes that up, because I think sometimes you can just give that job to somebody else, but you don't know what they're doing or what they're not doing because you don't have an understanding of what that job role is.
No,
so I kind of made a point to kind of learn it before I even thought about having my practice.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I was reading an article yesterday about this trend for quiet quitting. Have you seen the quiet quitting with all these people who would have done stuff like that, but now aren't doing that stuff like that? And it's interesting because there's two sides of everything, isn't there? One is the fact of, well, I'm not getting paid for it, so I'm not going to do it anymore. But the flip side of that is, well, I'm doing it, so I'm going to learn, I'm going to use that and maybe turn it into something else. It's a real interesting, quiet quitters.
Are you a control freak?
I would say I'm somewhat of a control freak, yeah, but I'm trying to be better at it now. I am delegating out a lot more.
Well, I was going to say, so you've been treating patients you've been open for 2 years, although the project has been much longer for the reasons you explained, but you've been open for 2 years. So now you've got a team of people. So how's that delegation going? Do you still kind of sweat the small stuff, or are you able to step back and take more of a leadership role?
Now it's better. I think, you know, having a squat practice in particular, I mean, any ownership is hard. I'm not taking that away from anybody, but having a squat practice and being so invested in it, I mean, monetarily like I was, but like even emotionally, because we built it like literally brick by brick. I think
it's your baby.
It was. And everything I had a hand in doing, like I would come back, my dad hadn't tiled one wall properly, I'd be like, take it off, we're doing this. It was not like it was just given and I just thought, right, I'm going to make it work. So I think there was a little bit of that, and I had to go through a period, and I think, I'm not sure if other owners have to do this as well, or they've been through something similar, where I had a little bit of almost a burnout phase, and I just thought, why am I doing this? I'm here all the time. I'm doing all of the jobs. I'm doing everything. And I know I want to make my business work, but I don't want to make it work at the sacrifice of my life, at the sacrifice of balance. So I think after about 6 months, that's when I kind of just thought, right, nobody is going to come and tell me take a day off. Because nobody is here who's going to say, no, you should. Obviously, the girls that work with you know that you're working extra hard and you're tired and you're here all the time, but nobody will force you to do something. And that's when I had to really reevaluate and think, what do I want and what's my priority? Yes, I want to make my business work, but I also want to have a balance in life. And I think that's when I tried to start delegating out more, recruited a practice manager. She's here all the time doing all of the compliance. I took myself out of that completely. So we have our meetings. I know what's happening and where we are with everything, but I tried to delegate it out a little bit more, the responsibilities, because I thought it was just too much. And I think, you know, if you have that kind of personality where you do want to be on top of things a lot, only you can say that to yourself. It doesn't matter how many times somebody comes to you and says, give the job to someone else. You're going to be like, no, I need to do this. And
that's
then,
right.
But I think great self-awareness on your part to recognise that in yourself, because lots of principals don't get there.
And
lots of principals just never let go of stuff, and they get busier and busier.
They'd be more successful if they adopted a more hands-off attitude.
They're working evenings and weekends, and in many cases, they're not the best person to do it either.
No,
because your primary training is as a technician. You're a dentist, and it may be there's somebody who's better in the business at doing bits that you aren't, and the business would move forward as a result of it. But unless you capture that ability to delegate, it never moves forward. So for you to have caught that so early on in your ownership journey is brilliant. It really is.
But I think if I hadn't caught it, it would be just such a detriment to my life. Like I would have just been here all the time. I was here until so late every day, here every Sunday, always here. And I just thought, this isn't what I wanted from having my own business.
It's not living either.
Yeah. No,
it's not living.
Yeah.
You need to get that life-work balance.
Yeah, definitely.
So going back to you are incredibly positive, and you strike me as a happy person. What makes you happy? Where do you get your happiness from?
I don't know if I am like always happy. I mean, I try to always be positive. I think, it's the people around you as well. I've always had all my family, my friends, kind of similar sort of outlook. And I think, definitely my parents, they've always worked hard. We've had shops, we've had, other businesses. They've worked really, really hard, set up their families, but I never felt ever that they were overworked or they couldn't do it or they didn't want to do it. They always just said like, well, that's what it is, and we're just going to keep going, and whatever we've got to do, we've got to do. And it was always quite positive in our household. And one thing that my parents always taught me is that don't take your stress from work home. So whenever I used to do that, because I do that, and I still sometimes do that, and I used to come home and be like, oh God, this has happened and that's happened, but I'd be like, just leave it at the door. Now is your time to relax and switch off and just chill. And I think you need that little bit of time to recharge and give your mind a bit of clarity as well.
Definitely. You need to learn to kick back and just like...
Yeah, and actually it makes you a better person when you're in the zone and focused as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you've got some energy to bring.
Yeah, definitely.
I think honestly, I think your story, we've kind of whizzed through it at a rate of knots, but I think where you are now, given that you were just about to open your practice in March 2020 and COVID hit, that would have chucked a lot of people.
I think
over
the fact you
edge.
bought the freehold in 2016 with that vision.
Yeah.
That year, and it obviously just sat there and ruminated.
Yeah.
And then
I'm not going to lie, there were times when I thought, and I was approached because the location is good, by many people to say, just name your price, sell the building, do this, do that. And I just thought, sometimes you have that thought in the back of your mind and you just think, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? But once I've made a commitment to see something through, and I just think, no, I said I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it. That's that.
And you had that sign.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but also it never goes away. You still have that option. That option will always be available to you. If one day you wake up and think, actually, I'm done. I've really enjoyed it. You still got your freehold. You still got your dental practice. But for as long as you're enjoying it, you should keep doing it.
Yeah.
I think it's a really inspiring story.
That's brilliant.
Really inspiring story.
And I think
we always
sorry,
go
ahead.
Go on.
No, I was going to say, I think that's like one of the really important things that I'm trying to learn a little bit more. And I think COVID really helped with that, is that, before I opened the practice, I always used to think, right, open a practice, you're set. That's your life. You're locked in. You've got the practice until you retire, you sell it, and that's that. That's your business. But now I think, since COVID, and there's been so much flux in every industry, and you spoke a little bit about quiet quitting and the change and shift in people's mentality. I mean, some for the better, some for the worse. But I think just that little bit of like, where you can see that there's a lot of change, it just means it shows you that there are other possibilities as well. And that's why I try to kind of be really mindful about if I'm burning out, if I'm enjoying it, if I'm not enjoying it, because there's always other options. And I think, what, teeth are teeth, they're not your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a great finish. Teeth are teeth, they're not your life.
Yeah.
We should have that as a logo, strapline on some of our courses.
Yeah. But no, I say genuinely, I think it's a fabulous story. It's a really good story. I think from your beginning to your studying, going overseas, coming back, the challenges you had in setting the practice up. I think people will take stacks from it.
I love the reverse
really
bit.
Will. Yes.
Other people have been the other way, and yours is like reverse back going to India.
That's right.
I don't think we've had a guest who's done that.
No. It might be a while before we get one too.
A unique story. Yeah. A unique story.
We always wrap up asking our guests the same two questions, just for a bit of sort of consistency to get into their minds. We like to ask the question, which is, if you could be the fly on the wall with somebody, when would that be? Where would you be? Who would you be with?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this, and I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. So I would say,
here we go. Go on.
Moon landing.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
I would say the moon landing. I would just want to know what actually happened.
Was it real?
Was it really real?
So you probably have seen that film. What was it, Capricorn 1 with Elliot Gould, where they set up in an aircraft hangar, don't they?
Yeah.
And they pretend that they landed on the moon. Now that would be interesting. That would be interesting. And so, if you could meet somebody, is there a connection back to that? If you could sit down and meet somebody,
Neil Armstrong, did he really land on the moon, or just walk off some big ladder somewhere?
I have actually thought about this a little bit, and I have a few answers actually. So I would love to meet like a spiritual leader. I think that would be amazing. I mean, I'm quite a spiritual person myself. I have faith, and I just think being in the presence of people like that is just sometimes so eye-opening. We get so much in our own heads about so much stuff, and I think having that kind of like big picture thinking is sometimes just such a wake-up call. So I would love to do that, like Dalai Lama or somebody. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
if it was somebody who's not living, would be my dad's grandmother, because she ruled the roost in his house, with love. And she was like such a strong woman back in her day, and everybody speaks of her so favorably. And I would just love to I'd met her briefly when I was a kid. I don't remember. I just would like to know what kind of person she is. And if it's like somebody living, Dolly Parton, I love her. What a woman! What a woman!
Dolly Parton.
Yeah,
I got to see her in concert. My wife got some. Well, my wife got some tickets. It was the year she came over to do Glastonbury. What was that? 17, 18.
Yeah.
And she was going to go with her friend, and her friend ended up being in America for a family wedding. So I went with her. I was blown away by her. God. She is awesome.
She's a show woman, isn't she?
She's got so much energy. The stories. I mean, just she spoke for a few minutes about her charitable work, where she's putting books into schools in America. The woman is incredible.
Do you know
she is such a powerhouse.
Her story is so inspiring. She came from literal poverty. She came from.
Right.
And honestly, I'm just so in awe of that woman. And I think, for her to be the woman she is, be proud of the woman she is, even though she got the kind of name of being a bimbo for such a long time, she didn't let it faze her. She was like, I am what I am. I like what I am. You either like it or you don't like it. And that's up to you. And you know what? I think just amazing. I love her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she's great. She's great. Thank you, Indy. That was absolutely fabulous.
Trying to think of a Dolly Parton pun then, but sort of failed. I only had a couple of songs.
Yeah, no, honestly.
We could shout Johal. And Johal. See, sort of works.
Oh, well, we might edit that piece out. We'll see how it goes.
I thought it was quite good.
No, cheers, Indy. It's brilliant.
It's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you.
It's a lovely story. I think people are going to take a huge amount from that. So, yeah, we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Look after yourself. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.